Signalgate blijft nazinderen in de Verenigde Staten. Wat een verhaal ook. Een journalist wordt per ongeluk toegevoegd aan een groepschat op Signal waar geheime en uiterst gevoelige info over bombardementen op Yemen wordt gedeeld. Zaten nog in die groep onder andere vice-president Vance, nationaal veiligheidsadviseur Mike Waltz en minister van defensie Hegseth en nog een handvol toplui. Kijk, Signal staat voor privacy, verzamelt minder metadata dan bijvoorbeeld WhatsApp. Vraag is natuurlijk wel of het de plek is om uiterst geheime overheidsinfo te delen. Zeker als je weet dat blijkbaar niet iedereen in de chat een veilig toestel zou hebben gebruikt. Eén iemand zat zelfs in Rusland op het moment van de gesprekken. Maar goed, Signal dus. Een paar weken geleden sprak ik met Meredith Whittaker over Signal, privacy en AI voor TerZake. Whittaker vond het oké om heel onze babbel hier te laten horen. Het gesprek is dus opgenomen voor het veiligheidsdebacle in de VS. Signal is dus een chat-app die echt serieus werk maakt van privacy, vertelt Whittaker. Zo principieel dat ze zelfs weigeren om bepaalde gebruikersgegevens te verzamelen. Anders dan WhatsApp of andere apps zijn ze een non-profit die volledig draait op donaties van gebruikers die privacy belangrijk vinden. Ter vergelijking, WhatsApp heeft 3 miljard gebruikers wereldwijd, Signal amper 70 miljoen en het wordt populairder in België en Nederland. Waar andere bedrijven heel snel zouden buigen voor overheidsdruk of grote zakelijke belangen, houdt Signal voet bij stuk. Niemand kan aan de metadata van gebruikers, zelfs werknemers van Signal niet, zodat echt niemand kan zien wie er met wie communiceert. Het is ze echt te doen om die fundamentele vrijheid van communicatie en niet om winst of grote groei, al wordt er wel nagedacht over andere producten om Signal financieel draaiende te houden. Signal lijkt wel een soort digitaal bolwerk tegen de steeds verdergaande surveillance in onze samenleving. Een app die zegt, jouw gesprek is echt van jou, punt uit. Ik ben Tim Verheijden en dit is een extra aflevering van de Virtual Podcast. Groeten trouwens van mijn co-host Pieter allemaal. Veel luisterplezier.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me for a talk on Signal. Now, Signal has been on my phone for many, many years. Only in recent weeks I have started receiving more and more messages, but mainly because people are looking for an alternative to big tech maybe, and Zuckerberg and co. We're aligning closer to the powers that be in the United States, following also statements like we have to get rid of the fact checkers, we need more masculinity in Silicon Valley, maybe more because of ethical reasons and considerations than of privacy. How do you see that? How do you look at that?
Look, one of the core tenets of Signal is that we don't collect data. We don't actually have an insight into why people use Signal or what the reasoning is, or certainly who they are, what they say, who their contacts list. We don't know any of that. So we don't really know why people are switching. But what we do know is that Signal has been consistent for over a decade in doing one thing, doing it very, very well, and not bowing to governments or corporations or the political winds. We simply focus on our mission. And so I think people are increasingly appreciating that type of mission focus, that type of consistency in an environment where we do see the big tech CEOs, changing their costumes, changing their walk, changing their talk, shifting based on the political winds. And I think people are waking up to the fact that that's not very safe when you have intimate data pooled on the servers controlled by these companies, when the core infrastructure of our economic and social institutions are run by these companies. And when, one regime or another, wherever you stand on the political spectrum, may inform profoundly how these companies operate and what they do ultimately with your personal data.
May I describe Signal as being more than an app to communicate, but by using it, by referring to it maybe to your friends, it's becoming more a statement against surveillance capitalism, big tech, or whatever you want to call it?
Look, at the end of the day, Signal is core infrastructure. It is a communications app that you can just pick up and use to say, hey, the laundry is ready. Hey, where we're meeting up. Hey, here's a meme for my group chat. We're not looking to give people a pin to wear on their lapel to make a statement. We want to build critical infrastructure for private communications that can preserve fundamental human rights in an era where we see surveillance and the erosion of those rights far outpacing technologies like ours. Now, we think Signal will not be the example that proves the rule for very long. We think we're going to see much, much more development that begins to raise the bar to the gold standard set by Signal, that we will see, more and more people, now that we're recognizing the dangers of centralized surveillance power in the hands of a few tech companies, building alternatives, switching to alternatives. But we don't think of this as a statement or a trend. We think of ourselves, and we take very seriously the mission of building core infrastructure for private communications that can preserve fundamental rights, that can preserve democracy.
When you're saying that, you might be referring to, I think, also Meta and their apps, also to WhatsApp. We spoke with a lot of people, and people sometimes really want to make the switch. What is the big difference between WhatsApp and Signal?
Yeah, well, you can think of, here's WhatsApp. WhatsApp uses Signal's technology. So Signal has created the gold standard for messaging encryption. And across the industry, if you do messaging encryption, you're likely to license Signal's technology to do that because it's the best in the business. And WhatsApp, like many, license Signal's core technology, but they only use it to encrypt what you say. So it's the contents of your messages. It's, hey, do you want to get dinner tonight? That is encrypted using Signal technology. That is private. Meta can't see that in most cases. However, they don't do what Signal does, which is rewrite the stack up and down to encrypt incredibly intimate information like what your name is, what your profile information is, who you talk to, when did you start talking to them, who is your contact lists, who's in your group chats, information that is incredibly, incredibly intimate and often goes under the name metadata, which I find to be a very technical term that makes it sound unimportant, when really this data is fundamental. It's the kind of data that is used to inform military operations. It's the kinds of data that can locate you in space or time. It can tell them, when did you start talking to a lawyer? When did you start going to an oncology clinic? Who is in your group chats? When did you start talking to a union organizer? Information that is incredibly telling, that often means they don't actually need what you said to understand who you're talking to understand your movements, to understand your interests. And we think that distinction is incredibly important for more and more people to understand as we move into an era where clearly we're seeing a popular understanding that privacy is so important and that privacy really does mean, much more than simply what you say. It's everything about you, everything about your community, everything about your movement and your patterns. And particularly in the age of very powerful AI, it's very important that we recognize that we need to keep that data private.
Yeah. Signal was founded, I think, before this very big, important era of privacy, but still it has always been very, very important. What are Signal's considerations in deciding to collect virtually no user data, even if it might limit maybe the development of new features?
Well, look, we're not looking to build new features that undermine our core mission. We do one thing and we do it very, very, very well. And adding new bells and whistles that would erode our ability to do that would compromise the high bar privacy we hold for ourselves and for the industry, is something that's simply uninteresting to us. Now, we will build new features. We think a lot about how we ensure that Signal works and feels and looks like a regular messaging app. Because, of course, if I am a high risk person, if I need to use Signal for life or death, because if a government or a corporation or someone who has power over me were able to access my communications, I could be in danger. You can think of journalists protecting their sources in hostile regimes. I can't use Signal if all my friends don't use Signal. I can't use Signal if my dad doesn't use Signal, if my gardener doesn't use Signal, if my landlord doesn't use Signal. So it's very, very important that Signal looks and feels normal, that you can just open it up and use it, that you don't have to spin up a command line and do some, fancy commands and something that feels unfamiliar when really what you want to do is just talk to your friends. However, we're never going to implement normal messaging app features in a way that would endanger that high-risk individual who relies on Signal, who trusts Signal for those life or death communications.
Yeah, how do you prevent, or how do you defend that integrity of your mission against maybe both internal, external threats? I can maybe potential buyers of people inside Signal who say maybe we have to shift the direction of the company or the app we are building.
How do we defend it? I think we defend it every day by continuing to hold that line. If someone comes and says we want to buy Signal for $1 billion, we say no. We say we're a nonprofit. We wouldn't be enriched by selling Signal. We would have to donate that money back into mission-aligned causes as per the tax code that we are incorporated under. When people say, hey, can you build an AI feature that would require collecting data, that would require accessing data, that may look fancy and shiny, but that would undermine your mission, we say absolutely not. When people want to add on any feature that would undermine that mission, we say no. And actually, it's very simple. When you know your principles, when you're consistent in your mission, it becomes very, very easy to make these calls. You simply say no and then get back to work.
Yeah, you say you make it sound so easy, but I can imagine that you might have potential buyers coming by and say, hey, here is $1 billion. Why not?
It's happened. It has happened. And you say no. It's very easy.
Who wanted to give you money?
Oh, I'm not, we're a privacy company, sir.
Good one. It's a good one. But you understand the question, right? Because you can have it as integrity, this mission, but still at the end of the day, I think in 2023 you wrote, in 2025, Signal would cost like 15 million euros per year to keep it up and running.
About 50 million.
Yeah.
That's still about steady state. And we are supported by donations. So again, if someone wanted to buy Signal, I wouldn't get rich. No one else would get rich here. We would be donating that money back into a charitable cause because we are incorporated as a nonprofit. And part of incorporating as a nonprofit is to guard against any future where myself or any executive at Signal, any director at Signal would be tempted to take that money, would be tempted to change sides. So we think a lot about how we structurally protect the mission of Signal because we don't want to make a handful of executives rich. We want to protect fundamental human rights across the globe by providing core technology that right now doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
That feels a lot better than $1 billion.
Really?
I swear to God. Well, I actually don't know, but I'm pretty sure.
Ah, I got you almost there. No, but Signal is indeed a foundation, a big difference from all the other companies. Are people willing to pay for Signal? Are individual users donating?
Yeah, we have many, many users who donate in the app. You'll see like a little message asking for donations. We have people who give $20 a month. We have people who give less or more. And then we have large donors who also give significantly to support Signal. So we do have a robust pool of donations. And we are seeing that more and more people are recognizing just how fundamental privacy is. And so that base is growing, and we encourage that growth because we need ways of supporting for infrastructure outside of the surveillance business model. And that's really core to what Signal does.
Yeah. Can you give me any percentage of revenue that is coming from users and maybe from other major donors?
It's all of them are users, but we get, So it's major and small donors.
What happens if Signal might run out of money one day? How likely is it that Signal might compromise its values in order to survive?
I mean, what happens if something bad happens in the future, right? You deal with it. And I see no future in which that looks likely. The value of Signal is becoming more and more and more clear to people, not less clear. And again, on the answer of will we compromise our values, we absolutely will never compromise our values. We would rather shut down. We've said that in many different contexts. It's like a song I sing repeatedly saying, if you want to undermine Signal, if you want to, mandate a backdoor, we will say no. We will walk rather than compromise our values. There's no there's no point in doing this work. There's no point in pouring the energy myself and my team pour into creating this precious infrastructure if we're going to undermine it.
Yeah.
There's a mission behind this.
You feel any political pressure to undermine the value and the core of Signal, especially now in the United States with the Trump administration?
Well, we do see political pressure regularly, frankly. We had a proposal in Sweden to mandate a backdoor in encrypted messaging systems. There's a proposal in France that was just defeated that would mandate similar. We have the chat controls legislation in the EU that would require scanning of all messages against a database that would undermine Signal and constitute a backdoor. So there's persistent political pressure, and frankly, there's a very long history to this kind of political pressure. We see, just an uneasiness on the part of states and some other centralized organizations with the idea that people would have access to communications that couldn't be surveilled by states, by others. And we continually push back against that. And, the frank truth is that encryption, the core technology that enables privacy, either works for everyone. Either it's mathematically robust and the people you love the most in the world and the people you hate the most in the world, both of them can benefit from it. And you have to accept that. Or we have no privacy. Or those journalists, those human rights workers, those militaries, the intelligence service, et cetera, do not have access to the fundamental right to privacy and to confidential communications on which so much else depends. So we got to be adults about this.
Yeah. Do you think people are aware of that fact? Because, of course, it when you talk about privacy to people, it's always, they can know everything. I have nothing to hide. But that riddle keeps on going and going and going. How do you convince people? Because in my surroundings, I think it's sometimes really hard to think even about privacy. Maybe not to act, but already to think even about it.
Look, I don't think people in general walk around thinking about encryption and its mathematical fallibility. I think people engage in a lot of magical thinking. I want it for me, not for thee. I think there's all sorts of factors there. But ultimately, I think everyone deeply, deeply cares about privacy. And the idea that they don't care about privacy was, in my view, kind of a myth that was self-interestedly propagated in recent history, in part by a number of tech companies who wanted to paint privacy invasion, who wanted to paint the surveillance business model as synonymous with innovation, as synonymous with progress. And so there was an idea that we progressed beyond privacy, that privacy is an outmoded cultural institution and we just need to get over it. Privacy is dead, people used to tell me when I would talk to them about 10 years ago. No one is saying that now. We really recognize that this is a fundamental value. And if we think about our family lives, if we think about our intimate relationships, if we think about the type of safety we need, the type of protection we need to be able to explore new ideas that aren't yet fully formed, to call out wrongdoing in our institutions, to question established norms, none of that can happen without privacy. None of that can happen if those in power are able to sift through our most intimate thoughts, our location, our acquaintances, our contacts, our preferences, and weaponize those in service of manipulation or control. That's fundamental, and we have that clearly documented through history.
On the other hand, if privacy is key for you, how do you prevent, for example, criminal organizations from using your technology as their go-tool for illegal activities? Because that is also a concern that people can express about Signal.
Encryption either works for everyone, militaries, intelligence agencies, human rights workers, journalists like yourself, or it's broken for everyone. Now, we do think a lot about the design of Signal and how to ensure that there aren't harm surfaces, that we aren't building features that lend themselves to bad outcomes. So we don't have any social media features. You can't go viral on Signal. You can't spread misinformation on Signal unless you're, laboriously texting it to your contacts and your groups. We kept group sizes. So you can't, we don't have social media features that broadcast to millions of people through channels. We don't have a directory where you can go in and find strangers. You have to encounter them and somehow adding them to your contacts. So we think a lot about how we keep Signal's purpose narrow and focused. But fundamentally, the answer is the answer I gave. Either we have it or we don't have it. And that we is everyone.
Yeah. Also, the groups or the people you maybe don't want to have it or to use it. It's for everybody or for nobody. That's clear.
Everyone.
How does that aligns with the vision and the mission of Signal? To be good, to be a good thing for everybody, to be a good thing for society.
We are in an age of unprecedented surveillance and data collection. There's never been more data available to governments, law enforcement, corporations in human history. This is truly unprecedented. It's on a continuum with things like state statistics and census data, of course. But what we have now, the granular data, my payment information from credit card processors, my location data, which apps I use, how long I spend on them. Am I searching for my crush's name in Instagram and how many times do I click on that? We have never had that level of surveillance over individuals and communities in human history. So underlying your question is an argument that more data is necessary, right? That somehow there is a gap in the ability to surveil and the ability to gather insights via data. And I see no evidence for that. There is more data available than ever. And in fact, when I do talk to folks in law enforcement and folks who are familiar with this area, almost always the real issue is finding the signal in the noise. There's too much data. It's difficult to identify, what is real and what isn't. And that there isn't enough enforcement. There isn't enough resources to actually pursue that data. So again, we need to frame our problem very clearly, and we need to understand the context within which the attack on Signal's ability to provide this refuge of privacy in this sea of surveillance rests.
You were referring to the other big tech companies a few questions ago, like a vast percentage of crucial technologies such as cloud services is controlled by a few Silicon Valley players. Think of Jeff Bezos, Amazon Cloud, which powers thousands of businesses and organizations. Zuckerberg dominates social media. Elon Musk, if he shuts down his satellites, Ukraine would be deaf and blind in its war against Russia. You have been warning about this a very, very long time. Is the world finally waking up to this reality, or is it like too little too late, you think?
I mean, look, I can't speak on behalf of the world. What I can say is that my work and my scholarship has focused on the material reality of surveillance and the concentrated power that is being constituted via the surveillance business model for over a decade. And that I continue to be concerned by this. And I think that the reality now is that 3 companies based in the US have 70% of the cloud market, and that it gives inordinate control. I think we can look at the Microsoft CloudStrike outage as an example of just what that single point of failure really means when, frankly, what was corner cutting on a very dangerous operation, a kernel update, led to outages in air traffic controlling infrastructure, in traffic infrastructure, in healthcare, in financial services across the globe. Because one company is able to make a decision on, do we do this update safely or not? Do we cut corners or not? Do we, is able to ultimately decide based on their best interest, not necessarily on the robustness of the variegated global infrastructure that is maintained by their systems. So if the world hasn't woken up, I don't know what will wake them up, because this is very clear and I don't think it benefits anyone.
Is there still anything that can be done to counter the dominance of a handful of big tech figures?
Of course, history's not written. You make history.
You make it also already, again, sound so easy, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, you have these 4 or 5 guys mostly. They're sitting on the front row during the inauguration. They control everything. And you say it can be done. What's key?
It can be done. Wait, it can be done, but hope isn't an invitation to complacency. Like optimism isn't saying it will be done. Now sit back and watch TV. It's an invitation to participate, right?
And how can I participate as an individual?
Well, I think you can dig where you stand. What is your context? Do you work in media? So where are you relying on these large centralized systems? Where are you relying on surveillance systems? Are you licensing your media company's data for way too little money to an AI systems that's going to undercut your business? Are you reliant on web traffic that goes, or on traffic that goes through a big platform? Assess where you are and see in your context, what can you do? I think that is true for many people. There are people who can answer that question with a lot. There are world leaders. There are heads of Fortune 100 companies. There are people who will have different answers to that question and may have different levers. But I think it starts with surveying the horizon that is around you and understanding exactly what your dependencies are, what can be changed, and what may need a little bit more work to change.
You were saying that Signal is considering to build also other products, new features. Is that happening in the near future?
We're working on encrypted backups right now, and we're always working on new features. We don't have new product lines. Again, we're very focused, and we don't have the big tech ethos of thinking that we have to do everything. We stay in our lane. We do one thing and we do it really, really, really well. We're best at the thing that we do. And we're not looking to do everything. We would love to see an ecosystem where there are many, many, many different independent actors doing their thing as well as possible, adding to a more heterogeneous, a more interesting, a more innovative tech in an ecosystem.
I also need to ask, of course, one question about AI, because you founded or co-founded the AI Now Institute. Is there one big take maybe you can share with us on AI today? Where is it headed, and how can we keep all these rapid developments under control?
Look, I think this is a longer conversation in some sense, but if we look at AI, there's a lot of capital that's gone into developing this large scale AI, this bigger is better, is approach these large language models and massive chatbots that are built on them. And I think a lot of what is often considered rapid development is also mixed in with a hype cycle that is really trying to find a consumer market fit for AI. And one of my concerns is that in this current moment, when everyone is talking about AI agents and these systems that are going to do everything for us, as if this is somehow magic, as if we have finally found the way to conjure a genie who can grant all our wishes and let us put a brain in a jar and not work at all, not click a button, not send a payment, not send a message. What we're actually doing is giving these systems extraordinary access to our lives, to our devices, to our data. We're installing systems on our device that can read our messages, can have access to our credit card information, may process this data off-site, can text our friends on our behalf. And I think we really do need to pause and recognize that this is both a severe privacy and security threat. We've already seen things like Microsoft Recall, which screenshots everything you do on your machine in order to give you an AI-based memory of what you were doing on your computer. Now, they've reformed that a little bit after a lot of outcry, but we have to remember, in order to give you a result, in order to run a process, in order to book concert tickets for you or respond to a prompt, AI has to have access to data. And that data is often very private. And the way that these AI systems are working is not always respecting the privacy of that data. So I do think we need some breaks on this. And I do think we need to decouple the hype that claims that these so-called agents are magical entities that are finally going to, solve all of our problems, to decouple that from the reality, which is that this is software and this is hardware. It's requiring extraordinary permissions. It's requiring extraordinary data access, and it's producing more data that can often be very consequential about our lives.
Yeah. If I hear you talking about it, I have the feeling like we keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. by giving away everything we have, our data, our most intimate data.
Well, I don't know that we are making this mistake. I think we've ceded power to a handful of actors that are making these decisions on our behalf and then telling us that they're natural and inevitable. But I never gave my data. I signed up to use email in college because I had to sign up to use email because I had to log into the university system. I signed up to use Google Docs because I have to collaborate with somebody that I'm writing with. I sign up for social media because that's where all of the invites for interesting concerts, that's where I learn about events, that's where our social and collective life has moved. I do these things because I want to participate in the world during my one lifetime, not because I want to give my data over. And I think the fact that tech products, the fact that the tech industry has foreclosed a lot of other options, has foreclosed doing things otherwise, that the fact that I genuinely don't really have a choice of using email, using docs, signing up for social media, unless I want to live like some kind of hermit, unless I want to fail to participate in life, unless I don't want to see my friends or don't want to go to that show, I think is a real issue here. But none of that indicates that people willingly give up their data. It indicates that the spaces for life and commerce and governance have been slowly foreclosed by these tech products. And we are now conscripted to use them. And what is actually coercion is being narrated as consumer choice.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for making some time for us.
Thank you. That was great. Bye.